Imagine if each morning when you wake up, you're smiling and looking forward to your day, knowing you are happy even while you're dealing with grief and loss. The Grief and Happiness podcasts inspires, comforts, and supports you with each new episode. I'm Emily Thoreau-Threat, welcoming you to explore with me your life of endless possibilities. Aloha. I am with you today with Gina Breedlove, and I am so excited about talking to her. She is an exquisite sound healer and has written just an absolutely gorgeous book that you're gonna want to. I was going to say read, but I listened to it and I loved listening to it because it's all about sound, and it just seemed logical to listen. So, welcome, Gina. Can you tell us a little bit about you?
Oh, thank you so very much for having me. Yes, as you shared, my name is Gina Breedlove, and I am the author of The Vibration of Grace, Sound Healing Rituals for Liberation. I am a sound healer, a grief doula, a vocalist and composer. And I more and more these days am thinking of myself as an oracle for grace. And the energetic of grace is this profound, expansive knowing of infinite possibility. Yes, of love, of healing, of us loving each other forward, even holding that knowing while we are at the moment experiencing so much global grief.
Yes, so much. It seems like every place has a different thing that the community where they are is dealing with a form of grief, just all over the world. And
Yes.
I have. Somebody was telling me some statistics about grief the other day, and I thought, they said like 80% of people are grieving at any one time. And I thought, well, I think that's probably 100% because there's always something. It's something we all deal with. It's something that many of us don't talk about, choose not to deal with, but that doesn't mean it's not there. And so I think work like you do and like I do is vital for the world. It's
absolutely
so important.
Absolutely. Yes.
So
Absolutely.
I had a kind of I'm not sure exactly how to say this, beginner's view of sound healing, because I've experienced a couple different kinds of sound healing and absolutely loved it. And when I heard about you, I thought, oh, now I can learn more about what I was doing. But what you do is so far beyond anything that I've experienced before. The two things I used to go to a retreat in California every year, and they had some optional things that you could do. And one of them was a sound healing. And it was, you were not alone, you were with a sound healer, just the two of you, in like a pergola with these beautiful floating shades around the outside. And he had all these different instruments, and you would just lie there on your back and he would do all these things with all the music. He didn't talk to you, just did all these things with the sounds. And it felt wonderful. I always got in that first in line to make sure I signed up and got it every year for that. And I really liked that.
Yeah.
And then somebody told me about a sound healing here on Maui that it went on, I think it was like every Sunday evening for quite a while. And so I would go to that. And then they lost the place that they were doing it, and she went in a different direction with what she was doing. So I kind of lost that. And with hers, a huge group of people would come, and we'd all lie on the floor, all of us with our heads toward the center of the room. And in the center of the room, she had all kinds of different singing bowls and drums and gongs and several different things. There's some that I wasn't familiar with even, and that was neat. And she would do that, and she had a particular way she sang, not always, but part of the time without words. But it was almost hauntingly beautiful.
Oh,
and it felt so good to go to that. I was so disappointed when they stopped doing it there. So
I'm sure. Yeah,
But that's great, but it's not what you do. It's,
well, I love everything you've described and my experience of the gongs resonating through my body. And when I've gone and laid on in front of a sound healer and received that beautiful medicine, and it has held me for days, and then it dissipates as it will, like sound keeps moving and ringing through the body, and it's beautiful, and it's an opportunity for respite. The way I hold sound, the way it comes through my altar, which is the language that I use to guide and teach and to use as a healing modality, is anchored in the human voice and also in practices, rituals that will help us to sustain and to shift narratives around, any limiting beliefs, narratives around what is possible, narratives around deservedness, worthiness, how we speak to each other, the way that we will lay the sound of our voice in another person's body. And so for me, a sound healing encompasses so many things. I feel that I am leaning into sound healing when I speak gently and lovingly and affirmatively to my grandchildren. I'm planting this grace in their skin. And or particularly when my grandchildren are with me because of the holidays, and they're 3.5 and 10 months old, and it's
oh,
just
wow.
amazing. But really, I can see the power of sound immediately when I am soothing them with a word
Mhm.
or sound or a tone. If the way that I will explain things, if my 3.5-year-old grandson gets caught around a concept of no, or why can't I, or taking time and really consciously and intentionally helping him to understand how I use the sound of my voice, the well-placed word. All of that is sound healing to me. So there's that. And then there's the work of helping folk to move grief out of the body using the sound of their voice or leaning into the sound of someone else's voice. I like to employ source sound as something that can help us to live and live well and be inside of our well-being for more than just a few days. Yeah.
So source sound, is that what you said?
I source the power of sound,
Oh, okay.
the
Okay.
power of the human voice, the power of toning, the power of music, right? The power of sound. And in that way, too, I think that it is something, sound healing, that you can give to yourself at any given moment as you need it.
Yes. That's so wonderful. I was thinking about what you were saying about your grandchildren and kind of imprinting them. And I have a great grandchild, step great grandchild right now, who is
Wow.
about 8 months old, I think, might be 9.
Mhm.
And she's amazing. And her parents, her mom is my step granddaughter, and she plays upright bass and sings. And her dad is a drummer. And they're
Yes.
professional jazz musicians who tour all over the world. So they're the real deal and
Yeah.
do teaching and that sort of thing. So this little baby's been growing up with sound around her all the time, and it's
Oh,
so they'll send little videos or things like this morning. I got a video of her watching the piano tuner play the piano, and she was just enraptured. She was really paying attention and seeing that. And I'm sure
mhm.
she's going to grow up with music as one of her languages.
Oh, absolutely. And what a brilliant language it is.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a lovely story. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think about sound and things in my life and how I started to say I resonate with them, and that makes sense for music and sound. I used to play a flute in the band, and You could
Oh,
only have a certain number of people in each rank in the when you're marching in the marching band, and I think it was like 8, and there were 9 people who played flute.
right.
And I'm 6 feet tall, so I was much taller than anybody else, and so I always got pushed back into the band someplace, and they would put me right in front of the bass drum.
Uh-huh.
And I loved marching or performing or doing the things with that bass drum because it vibrated through my whole body and it was
Oh,
just
it's
so
your heart.
energizing.
Yeah, it's
It
the
was
heartbeat.
just,
Yeah,
yeah, it was,
yeah.
oh, wonderful.
That's so cool. That is such a cool story. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, they at one point wanted to move me back up with the flutes, and I said, nope,
Nope.
like you're right where I am.
Holding my position right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
So one of the things I enjoyed about your book so much is all the ritual,
Yes.
because I think ritual is an easier way to remember things so that you can easily repeat them.
Yes.
And you're so step by step. I know when I write toward the beginning of the book, you do the scale with singing the scale, and I did it right along with you. And I thought, this feels good. I'm going to keep doing this and paying attention to what I'm doing with it. And I could learn it from, and as I said, I'm glad I heard you read the book because I could learn it from you telling me about it and practicing it with you. And now I feel that that's kind of ingrained as something that I've learned how to do.
Right. 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 Good. I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased. And in that chapter, finding your soul tones, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's finding the sound, the tone, the note that best aligns, that creates a sense of calm in your body, a sense of connection in your body, and then leaning into that tone. You know, we use the C major scale. And when I say we, I mean me and Grace, right? Using the C major scale because it's so identifiable. It's something, the do, re, mi of it all, from the Sound of Music. And I wanted to make sure that these rituals were accessible. So, yeah. And then leaning into again and again the sound that brings you back to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Or that helps you find your way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that too. I think lots of us equate different like songs that we know with different periods of our life or experiences in our life, and they can be really powerful. You hear the song and it takes you right back to wherever that was.
Yeah, it's immediate. Yeah. It's like it's a sense memory.
Mm-hmm.
It's like smelling something and all of a sudden there you are in your grandmother's kitchen.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Hmm.
You had so many great things in the book. I don't even know where to start with talking to you about them. What would you say to someone who is interested in sound healing and wanted to get started and wasn't sure what to do?
I find that, I think I have shared this often in lately around humming. Like humming,
Hmm.
if you can make sound, if you can access the sound of your voice, humming is a point of entry. It's just a beautiful beginning place when you start to work with your voice, with the sound of your voice, and not even like humming in a way that sounds musical. It could just absolutely be hum, mm, hum, hum, hum. I mean, I'm a singer. It's hard not to
Mm.
sound musical, but any kind of humming, humming is such a gorgeous tool for so many things. I feel like science is getting caught up with what we have known intrinsically forever. Because my grandmother hummed and her mother hummed, and to bring a sense of solace, right, to a moment and into your own body. And I have found that humming will cut an incessant narrative. Like if you lean into a
Mm.
hum, anything that you may be twirling yourself around, so to speak, generally anxiety, particularly now,
Mhm.
there are so many reasons to be anxietized. And so humming will help. Humming will help. Humming, and I would say softening or closing your eyes and leaning into the vibration of your own sound. is a good way to begin a sound healing practice. Humming before difficult conversations. I hum when I go, when I am grocery shopping for my family. I live in a city where most folk drive. I come from a city where most folk walk. Both things I would hum. Humming is what I would say. I would invite folk to a beginning place.
That's wonderful. I hadn't thought about it that way before, but the humming is a vibration, and all sound is vibration. And there's something about feeling vibration in your body that, to me, it feels like healing or comforting.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's really wonderful.
Yes, I will. And of course, we pair it with intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So my intention in this moment, I may have seen the latest horror in our social media, things that are posted, and my heart responds and my body responds, and I'm a mama and I'm a grandmama. And so of course my mama heart responds to what I'm seeing, and grief begins to rise in my body. Humming, for me, the intention would be to elicit grief, to bring the grief to the surface, to bring it forward. And I would use humming to do that, to make that happen. Like I would lean into the feeling by turning toward it and not turning away from it, and humming into it, almost like we're turning to dive into a big wave. That's the imagery that is coming, if my way. I'm thinking about it like a day at the beach, and I turn and here's this wave coming, and what am I going to do? Am I going to turn my back and try to outdistance it? No, I'm going to turn toward it and dive under the way I've been taught. And I think of humming and turning toward grief as the same, like it's a perfect analogy.
Yes. Yeah, I was thinking about grief, and I think about it a lot since that's what I do, what I work on.
Right.
But I kept thinking, oh, that would be so good for someone grieving, as I was listening to your book, that different things. And one of them that appealed to me, and I used to do a lot of theater, and there was I can't tell you the name of it right now, but an Irish play where they were keening. And when you were
Yes.
talking about wailing, it reminded me of keening.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I found what you were saying about wailing was absolutely fascinating and applies to grief. Could you tell us about that?
Oh, I absolutely can. And keening is a part of my lineage.
Ah,
My mama, yeah. I'm a biracial woman, and my mother's people are from Ireland.
oh,
And so, and keening is the expression of grief, like using sound, and a particular sound, like a note, like a drawn out wailing note that happens when, and the unimaginable, or any grief really. I won't just make it about the unimaginable. And I have rituals to turn toward grief in the body, and one of the rituals is wailing. And wailing, again, is, of course, grieving with sound and allowing it to come through the body. So often, grief will get caught in the throat and not move. And I mean, for so many reasons, Emily, as we know, like we are taught to suppress grief, particularly in this country. I will say,
yeah.
grieving isn't sexy. And it's not, it's this thing about submerging an organic response to loss, an organic response. And it makes us sick, of course. And so we're in this realm of the upside down when it comes to having our responses, our feelings about a thing. We are taught to keep it moving in all the various ways there are to do that. There are all these sayings that are designed to get us to circumvent grief. One of my least favorites is, you need to put on your big girl panties and make this happen. Things like that. Terrible, terrible things that undermine a body's natural response. And so in the book, I have several rituals on how to find, locate, source, and move the grief from the body. And one of them is wailing. And I invite folk to, really what may sound like very everyday things. find the saddest movie, find the movie. There are parameters, like don't, find a movie that is not violent, but it's sad because there's loss that you connect to. I actually talk about the last 20 minutes of the movie, The Color Purple, the original movie, because it's a scene where two sisters, after being separated for 30 years, reunite. And it's a universal story. Like which one of us cannot relate to missing and longing? And then having satisfaction, like, oh, at long last, here is my beloved kin. And even seeing that scene, just that scene, will cause grief to move in through my body. And any grief that I've been storing for whatever reason, like I'm in a deadline or I'm working or I'm traveling and there's just not a space for me to allow, I will move it in that moment. I encourage folk to create opportunities for yourself, create the conditions, right? So take an hour, and that takes some doing because we have families, we have lives, we are very, very busy folk in the world. And do it. Carve out an hour or two for yourself where all you are going to do is focus on your grieving. To wail, find that movie or that song, put it on repeat, that moment. And then sometimes too, Emily, we know it's difficult for us to grieve for ourselves. So if we're watching something, we'll begin to grieve for what we are seeing. We'll grieve for the character, or we'll grieve for the lyric. And the body doesn't care why you're grieving. It's the mind that divvies up and compares and manages and measures, right? As we know. But the body just wants to let what it's been holding. And so grieve. And when you begin grieving for this character in the movie, a lot of things will begin to come out and queue up, and then you will find your way to that something that needs to be released in your own body for you. But even if you don't, a good cry is a good cry. It creates the opportunity for an unfettered feeling, because grief is heavy, it's weighty, and it needs to be allowed.
It does. I know. It seems to me like when you go to a mortuary or to a funeral, that sort of thing, that you expect it to be quiet and everybody just sits there in their own little space and it's quiet. And if they cry, they get all embarrassed about it. And I think that's such a sad way to look at grief. I know neither of my husbands who died had that kind of a service, because that wasn't the kind of people they were.
That's
and
right.
they wanted music, big, full, beautiful music that they loved, and other things like that. And that kind of sound was so much more comforting.
Oh, so much more. I agree with you completely. I am the person that would lay on the floor and allow it to move through. And this is just what I'm doing today. And I think, and I know that there's a lot of healing to do around grieving, and a lot of healing work and a lot of unlearning that is happening and needs to happen.
Yeah, that unlearning is important, because a lot of times we don't even have any idea where that learning came from. It's just what you've seen people in your circle, in your sphere, react. And so you kind of puppet what they do, mimic what they do, because that's what you're exposed to. But you can make your own decisions about it.
Yes, it's a practice. It's a ritual. And sometimes you do know, right? Like particularly in the African American community, which is where I come from, there are incredibly clear legacies of grief suppression and why. And we understand why. I understand why in my household, my father would say, toughen up, or I'll give you something to cry about. He was terrified that his very sensitive baby girl was going to be in the world and be at the effect of racism and all the that exists, and that I would be harmed. I understand it. And it is a disservice to the body. It is. And so how do we remake? How do we unlearn? And how do we allow our bodies to have what our bodies need to have? you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I know there was such a huge difference between when Jacques died and then Ron died about 12 years later. And so I had the two biggest griefs in my life in similar circumstances with both my husbands died of the same thing, which I had no idea when I got together with Ron that he was going to have the same thing. And so the experiences about a lot of things were very similar, but the experience in me or my experience in dealing with the grief between the two was as different as it could be.
Mm.
Because I just was so unsure of what to do and what was appropriate for me when Jacques died. But by the time Ron transitioned, I was fully aware of what was happening, what was going to happen, and it's so different. And I could just approach everything about it differently. That doesn't mean I didn't grieve. That doesn't mean I didn't cry and hard sometimes. But you just learn from experience with this, and the more you can be around things like death doulas now that's such a cool thing. I didn't hear about death doulas till the last few years. They've probably been around for a long time, but they're just becoming people are becoming aware of them in society.
Yes,
and what a gift!
Absolutely, it is a gift, and I would think that in different times there was a death doula in every village, right? And may not have used that language.
Yeah.
But that is exactly the position held, to guide folk on that journey to the great unknown.
Yeah.
Till it's known, right?
Yeah. And I've also realized that I was kind of doing some of that throughout my life without really realizing it, because it seemed like whenever anybody was nearing the end of their earthly experience here, that somebody would call me and say, could you come sit with them? And, they needed, like families would need some space or some time that had been with them continually. And I'd say, sure. And I was always doing that at a hospital or at a bedside at home, and being there and just listening to the families. And you don't have to tell them anything. They need to have somebody they can say things to that they wouldn't say to anybody else.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. And witness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And fearlessness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Fearlessness is to have somebody that's grounded around you. Just can really help a whole lot.
I have to agree with you completely. It is such a gift. Yeah. It's such a gift. It really is. It is. Yeah.
One of the other things, there were so many things in your book that I loved, but one of them that you talked about was anger and releasing anger. And I thought, wow, this is so cool. There's so many people who could use this. Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The rituals, there are rituals that guide the expression of anger. And it just, that will take you step by step to how you can move it out of your body without harming yourself. And also to keep it directed as something that needs to move outside of you and not something that you will turn on yourself, which is often what we are shaped to do because we don't have the tools, we don't know. And also talking about anger, like we talk about grief, like it is an organic response. It's the body's way of saying something's not cool, something's not right. I'm upset about something. There's some way in which my no or my yes is not being honored. Like, just really interrogating it as something that can also be a gift. It's another thing that we're taught to shy away from.
Mm-hmm.
And there's value, I believe, that helps us to understand and own ourselves. Like all of these rituals in the book for me, and the reason why I call it sound healing rituals for liberation. The liberating piece is not being tethered to something that is outside of you. Tethered, I do understand fully that I, not that, and can govern my own healing. And not that I don't need you or us, because I mean, part of governing my own healing is reaching for the things or the people that can help me and guide me into the rooms in myself that I'm not able to get to on my own. And the governance piece comes from I have to make the choice. And any healing practice is rigor. It requires something of me. And the thing again about sound baths, which I love, require me to get there and lay down and receive. But rituals of grieving, rituals of moving anger, rituals of releasing require practice, require action, and sometimes daily action of me. So all of the rituals are co-created from your own desire for freedom, and freedom of the things that drive you, drive your mind, drive your thoughts, the thing that happened 30 years ago that keeps happening, in mind and in imagination and therefore in the body. How do we jettison those things? How do I put it down and never pick it up again? That's what these rituals will guide you to do. And their practice, you got to stay in your rituals. But I have personally experienced, I mean, all of this work is experiential. I share about my own trauma, the traumatic events. I share about these stories to show what is absolutely possible for ownership of self, Yeah.
Yes, and the I really adore about the books that it's like this is how you do the ritual. You can read. I would suggest reading through all of it and figure out what you want to do first, and
Yes,
just kind of
yes.
work your way through. And as I said earlier, I'm torn between the audiobook and a paper book because I was thinking I want to write notes here. I want to mark this page as this is a ritual I want to come back to and do first,
Sure.
and you can't
Sure.
do that when you're listening to an audiobook so much.
Right.
So
Right.
I highly recommend both versions. and it's okay to buy two of the same thing because they're different.
They're different. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
And
Yes.
speaking of sound healing, your voice is healing. You just got such a beautiful voice.
Oh,
And I love listening to you reading the book.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That makes me very happy. Thank you.
Well, I have enjoyed talking to you so much today. Is there anything that you'd like to tell our listeners before we end?
Thank you for your time. Thank you for asking that. Thank you for bringing me to Hawaii. I have been feeling such a profound love for the people, for what I witnessed of folks supporting each other, and also being very clear about boundaries around, no, we are living on this land. We are rebuilding here, and we are going to help each other. Like that has been something that has inspired me to witness. And so I thank you for that. I think I would like to share that I am offering a 21-day practice, a community sound healing practice that begins on January 11th. I am asking folk to sign up by the 10th because I'm asking people to do the whole 21 days with us, the whole 21 days. And so you can go to my website, GinaBreedlove.com, to sign up. And, you need to have the book to do. And the 21-day practice is actually in the book. So you'll be following the text together. And that's what's up next. And then also just, registering, letting me know where you are so I can send information about where I'll be on the next leg of my book tour.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
This is an amazing opportunity for you, and you'll understand that when you see the book, and you probably have a pretty good understanding to start off with, just having listened to Gina today.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you for your presence and your time and for the work that you do.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And it's my pleasure to get to talk to you. That was just wonderful. And I'm so glad that because I hadn't heard of you before you were recommended to me. And I'm so glad that somebody told me about you, because this is just fabulous information for the people who listen to this podcast.
Oh,
And
awesome.
I really support what you're doing and highly recommend people get your book either way or both.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for being my guest today. And for our listeners, I'll be back next week with another wonderful guest. And I'm so glad you listened to us, because there's so much comfort you can find here. And I appreciate being able to help you on your journey. Aloha. Do you want more comfort, support, and happiness? Join the Grief and Happiness Alliance. Visit my website at lovingandlivingyourwaythroughgrief.com and read my book, Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, rate it, review it, and binge on all our episodes on grief and happiness. I can't wait to welcome you back to another episode